The story opens in a fantasy world with a medieval setting, where we see a high school student named Rio lying down inside a bare cottage. The interior is almost empty, just a knife and 2 books rest on the table. Without paying much attention to them, Rio steps outside to get some fresh air. All he sees are towering mountains stretching in every direction. He looks down at his hands and says, "Water, come forth." A small splash of water appears in his palm, summoned by magic. This all began just a few days earlier, when Rio suddenly found himself in a blank, white space. As he tries to make sense of his surroundings, a celestial being appears and assures Rio that this isn't the afterlife. The angel, pleased to finally have someone to talk to, also breaks the news that Rio has died, hit by a truck back in his original world. Rio isn't too surprised and quickly figures out that he's been given a chance to live again. He casually refers to the angel as Michael in his head and asks what kind of life he should aim for this time around. Michael tells him to follow his heart. Rio decides he wants a peaceful, quiet life, nothing too flashy. Michael agrees and prepares to send him to a magical world called Fee. Before the transition, Michael gives Rio some background. Only about 20% of people in this world can actually use magic, but Rio will be one of them. He's naturally attuned to water magic. Since he asked for a quiet life, he's placed in a secluded area called the Forest of Rondo, living in a simple cottage. To help him settle in, Michael has stocked 2 months' worth of supplies inside a frozen storage hut nearby. He's also left behind 2 useful books, one about the world and another for learning magic. That's how Rio picks up his first spell, conjuring water from thin air. Fortunately, he doesn't need to worry about danger just yet. Michael has put up a protective barrier around the cottage to keep monsters at bay. Rio continues practicing and manages to summon water without needing to speak the spell aloud, just by visualizing it. Pretty handy. With this newfound ability, he fills the bathtub with water, though it's admittedly kind of strange, since the source seems to come from inside his own magic reserves. The water is freezing, so now he needs to figure out how to warm it up. He tries the classic fire starting method, rubbing sticks together, but it's a total failure. Frustrated, Rio starts thinking, maybe there's a magical solution to this too. Using the knowledge from his past life as a chemistry student, Rio separates hydrogen from oxygen, causing the water to freeze into ice. With the ice now in hand, he cleverly uses it to focus sunlight like a lens, eventually managing to create fire. Thanks to that fire, he finally warms up some water and takes a well-deserved, relaxing bath. Refreshed and clear-headed, Rio realizes he could have just reversed his ice-making method using magic to heat water instead. But he saves that thought for later. While eating, it hits him, he needs to start hunting soon or his food will run out. The problem is, stepping into the forest means running into monsters, and Rio knows the small knife Michael gave him won't be much help. That means he now has to figure out how to use combat magic. The next day, he starts practicing a simple spell, Water Ball. But when it hits a tree, it doesn't leave a scratch. So he adjusts it, narrowing the stream into an arrow shape. After hours of trial and error, he manages to produce a basic version of the water jet spell. Still, it's far from powerful, and the tree remains unharmed. So he shifts focus to ice magic instead, since water magic hasn't proven useful in a fight. He tries to create and control an ice crystal, but projecting it turns out to be harder than he expected. Despite the struggle, Rio eventually gets to the point where he can summon several ice crystals at once, though launching them remains out of reach. After days of non-stop effort, he finally gains the skill to form the crystals instantly, still not perfect, but it's enough to make do. Out of time and options, he decides to use the ice as a makeshift spearhead and heads into the forest. At a riverbank, he finds some quartz and feels a bit relieved. If he runs out of mana, he can still start fires manually. While gathering herbs, a monster known as a lesser boar charges at him. Frozen in fear, Rio nearly gets taken out before his instincts kick in just in time to dodge. This time, he fights back. He makes the ground slick with ice, sending the boar tumbling. Quickly, he summons sharp icicles that impale the creature, ending the threat. Rio pulls off some impressive water magic under pressure. But he knows he's far from ready. Back at his shelter, he flips through the monster compendium and quickly realizes the lesser boar is one of the weakest creatures out there. Determined to prepare, he studies the book, trying to understand what other dangers might lurk out there. When he gets to the dragon entry, the only advice given is to run, though it admits running probably won't help. Then he reads about something even worse, the Acuna. In that case, the book says not to run, just pray you never run into one. The book doesn't offer much guidance, but he keeps flipping through it anyway. The next morning, he gets ready and heads back outdoors. The day starts off well. He stumbles upon a tree filled with fruit. The first bite is pure joy, a small reward for all the trouble he faced the day before. The flavor alone feels like it was worth everything. Unfortunately, peace doesn't last long. A sudden attack from an assassin hawk knocks him flat. He quickly realizes he's completely outmatched. The bird is stronger, and it's using air-based magic that can't even be seen. There's no way to fight it head-on. He recalls something he read in the book and bolts, but outrunning a bird seems impossible. Eventually, realizing he can't escape, he stops and decides to face it. Using his ice magic, he freezes the hawk. Thinking he's won, he gets closer, only for the creature to shatter the ice. It's still alive, but now one of its eyes is badly injured. Recognizing that Rio has grown stronger, the hawk flees. Rio drops to the ground, exhausted, mumbling that the peaceful life he wanted isn't turning out to be so peaceful after all. Trying to return home, he soon realizes he's lost from all the running. While wandering the forest, he stumbles upon something terrifying, a Dullahan. The headless figure stands silently as smoke drifts from its neck, calmly tending to its horse. Eventually, he manages to find his way home. From that point on, he dedicates himself to improving. Whether it's battling wild creatures or fishing, his ice magic steadily becomes more powerful, strong enough to slice through a mountain. He keeps working to grow stronger, gradually adjusting to this unfamiliar lifestyle. Yet, each night he returns to the place where he first met the Dullahan. He doesn't go there to win, but because every clash with the creature seems to push him further. Oddly, there's no mention of Dullahans in the monster guide he's been studying. That could mean the Dullahan isn't actually a monster, or it's just not listed in beginner-level material. After yet another tough battle, he realizes something. Maybe the Dullahan keeps meeting him not to defeat him, but to help him grow. One night, he sees the creature form a blade out of ice. The Dullahan offers the sword to him. Understanding the gesture, he accepts it. After that, the figure silently vanishes. For the next few days, or perhaps weeks, things settle down for Rio. Until he comes face to face once more with an old enemy, the hawk. He's in the middle of training when the bird reappears. It's now missing one eye, and it's obvious this is the same hawk from before. However, it looks different, larger, darker, and more dangerous. It's evolved. It dives at him with overwhelming force. Rio quickly conjures a 5-layer ice barrier, but the hawk breaks right through it. He pushes harder, creating a 10-layer wall, but the hawk smashes through that too. As he unleashes his ice lancer, the hawk charges straight through the attack, aiming right for him. Losing balance, the support stick he relied on drops, and in a split-second decision, he grabs the sword he received from the Dullahan and strikes at the hawk. Surprisingly, the blade is effective. The hawk recoils but dives in once more. This time, he drives the sword deep into the creature, bringing it down for good. Walking over to its fallen body, he acknowledges the hawk's tenacity. After all, he did take its eye again. It had every reason to retaliate. But through this struggle, he grew stronger, and in that, he owes the hawk some gratitude. He realizes the hawk had evolved just to battle him, and in respect, he offers it a warrior's end, falling by his sword. He draws out the blade, and the hawk breathes its last. He then sets off once again, unaware of a powerful dragon watching nearby. Suddenly, the dragon approaches and speaks to him with an unexpected shock. Rio is stunned to hear a dragon's voice. The dragon, in turn, is relieved that he can use his telepathy once more. The dragon asks Rio if he's encountered a certain evolved hawk. Rio confirms he defeated it. Surprised, the dragon questions how Rio managed such a feat. Rio reveals the sword. The dragon immediately recognizes it as the blade of the Fairy King and wonders what Rio must have done to earn such a weapon. Rio, however, is just as puzzled. With his own questions answered, Rio asks the dragon a few of his own. They chat until nightfall before the dragon announces his departure. Before parting ways, Rio introduces himself, and the dragon responds with his name, Lewin. Life seems to be going exceptionally well for Rio in this new world. So much so that the angel who reincarnated him double-checks his divine record and finds something crucial he missed. Rio possesses a rare trait the angel hadn't accounted for, as no one sent to that world before had it: eternal youth. What does this power truly mean for Rio? How will it shape his future? Elsewhere, by a riverside, a red-haired boy lies motionless on the shore. Who is he? Early in the morning, Rio sets out on a routine trip to the shore to gather seafood but stumbles upon the remains of a wrecked ship. In true survival fashion, he finds a lifeless man near the debris. One look is enough to tell that the man's spirit has already departed this world. But then Rio spots another person, Abel, lying unconscious on the opposite side of the wreckage. This one, fortunately, is still breathing. To provide some background, Abel and a group of others were traveling on a boat when a freak storm erupted from nowhere. In the middle of the chaos, a monstrous sea creature, something like a colossal octopus, attacked, causing the vessel to split apart and send everyone overboard. Luckily, the ship wasn't far from the coast, which explains how they ended up washed ashore. At present, Rio has brought the still unconscious Abel back to his cottage and stepped out to take care of chores. Abel eventually wakes up, confused about his surroundings. Stepping outside, he's greeted by the sight of a beautifully arranged flower garden and a neat stone walkway leading into the woods, everything clearly handcrafted by Rio. Rio returns just then and is visibly relieved to see Abel awake, despite not knowing who the man even is. Abel is a bit shaken, not just from the situation but also because he didn't sense Rio's presence approaching. Could it be that Rio has some kind of detection avoidance ability? But what unsettles Abel most is Rio's full-on commitment to the stranded survivalist lifestyle. Abel thinks about asking Rio if he's some kind of wild hermit without proper clothes but decides against it, not exactly a great way to start a conversation. Instead, he introduces himself respectfully and thanks Rio, assuming he had saved him. Rio quickly corrects him, saying he just carried him back, nothing heroic about it. But Rio's tone turns serious when he reveals that all the other passengers didn't make it. Abel seems unfazed, telling Rio not to pity them since they were actually smugglers. He starts explaining more, but his stomach interrupts the conversation with a loud growl. Rio laughs it off and suggests they continue the talk over a meal. Now that some familiarity has set in, Abel finally asks why Rio doesn't have any proper clothing. Rio explains matter-of-factly that he simply doesn't have access to materials like fabric or thread. Abel suggests just buying clothes from a nearby settlement, until it hits him that Rio must be broke and living like a hermit for a reason. Still, he assumes there's a town not far from here. Rio clears up the misunderstanding by saying that there are no towns close by. That's why he's living like this, completely isolated. Curious, Abel asks how Rio manages to find food and supplies. What Rio says next floors him. He reveals that he's a water mage. This astonishes Abel, who mentions that even in the central province, only about half the people are capable of using magic. Rio feels disheartened after learning that he might not be as unique as he believed, especially since the angel Michael had mentioned that only 20% of people could do what he did. Still, Abel wants to investigate something further, so he asks Rio to take him back to the shipwreck site. When they return to the shore, they're surprised to find no bodies remaining. Rio guesses the sea might have dragged them away or perhaps monsters devoured them. This realization reinforces how lucky Abel was to be saved by Rio. Without his help, Abel likely would have met the same grim fate. Touched by this, Abel tells Rio that even though they barely know each other, he considers him a genuine friend. Abel searches through the wreckage but fails to find what he was hoping for. So, he decides to change plans and head to a nearby town called Loon, which he believes lies to the north. He asks Rio to come along and act as his guide, explaining that he has no clue where Loon is. Although Rio doesn't know either, he still agrees to help and says they can start the journey the following day so he can get ready. Abel accepts the offer and seals it with a handshake. That evening, Rio quietly says farewell to his peaceful life in Stardew Valley and ventures into the forest to also part ways with Dullahan, the legendary being who trained him. He informs Dullahan about his upcoming departure and promises to return someday. Grateful for all the wisdom and support, Rio requests one last training match with his mentor. They engage in a fierce final sparring session, going full force. As expected, Dullahan emerges victorious. Before they part, Dullahan gives Rio a farewell present, a proper hero's outfit, finally shedding Rio's ragged look. The next morning, dressed in his new attire, Rio sets off alongside Abel toward the north, officially leaving behind his solitary medieval life. Along the way, they're confronted by a wild boar. Abel takes the lead and, although he's unable to cast magic, he channels a sword technique to boost his agility and pierces the boar in one strike, killing it instantly. As they travel deeper into the woods, the forest stretches endlessly. They make camp that night beneath a giant tree. The following day, they stumble upon a pond, where they spot a pair of lizard men sharing a tender moment in the water. Abel chooses to avoid conflict, remarking that lizard men are formidable, and suggests taking a path to the left. However, Rio picks up on something using his detection skill. Several creatures are closing in fast. He suspects the lizard men might have noticed them. Abel steps forward to shield Rio, but Rio refuses to stand down, sensing that they're about to be surrounded. Abel doubts Rio's magic can help without a staff, but is shocked when Rio demonstrates that he doesn't need one. He can cast spells silently and effortlessly. Without hesitation, Rio conjures several sharp ice crystals and hurls them toward advancing lizard men, taking them down instantly. The battle that had left the confident Abel struggling is resolved in mere moments. Amazed by how quickly things ended, Abel turns to Rio and asks what kind of magic he just used, since it was unfamiliar to him. Rio downplays it, casually stating it was just a water lancer spell. While Rio doesn't see it as anything impressive, Abel is clearly astonished. He saw 4 lances appear at once. This contradicts what Abel knows about magic, particularly that most mags can only cast a single spell at a time. Concerned, he brings it up, and Rio, with a hint of amusement, points out that Abel seems unaware. Trying to shift the topic, Rio reminds Abel that he's not a wind mage, but a water mage. Before they resume traveling, Rio performs a short chant and summons fresh water to drink. He offers some to Abel, noting how exhausted they both are and how long the road ahead will be. Abel drinks, still silently uneasy. He'd noticed Rio's chant differed greatly from the ones he's accustomed to, but Rio offers no explanation. As they journey on and draw closer to the city of Luna, Abel hands Rio a coin, explaining it's accepted in Luna. Rio lights up with joy. This is the first money he's touched since arriving in this world. Noticing Rio's excitement, Abel goes on to explain that various currencies exist, and this particular one belongs to the kingdom of Nightly, of which Luna is a part. He also tells him that the kingdom includes 3 main cities: Luna, the Handelu Federation, and the Debuhi Empire. The moment Abel mentions Debuhi, Rio suddenly pauses. Sensing something off, Abel questions him. Rio denies knowing the place but admits the name threw him off. It sounded so odd to him, he jokes that introducing oneself as a member of Debuhi wouldn't sit right. Luckily, he's not from there. They both laugh it off and keep walking. As they pass through a rocky area, Abel spots something unusual. One of the rocks is moving. He attacks, and Rio quickly joins in, only to realize they've stumbled into the nest of rock golems. The creatures begin reforming after every hit. Abel charges at one, stabbing it with his sword, but it recovers instantly. Realizing physical attacks aren't working, Rio casts a 10-layered ice rock spell, smashing 2 of the golems to pieces. With success, he repeats the move against the remaining ones. When they approach the final golem, Rio notices it's lying still. Upon closer inspection, he understands why. It's flipped on its back. These golems draw energy from the ground, and without contact, they're powerless. They also discover a group of monster cores on the ground. Abel immediately recognizes what happened. The golems must have defeated several monsters earlier, and those cores are quite valuable. They decide to treat it as part of their journey's rewards. Rio thinks about grabbing more from the other golems but stops when he notices those golems battling the ice boulders. Not wanting to get involved, they quietly slip away. As they move forward, they spot another creature. Rio initially thinks it's just a frog, but Abel believes it might actually be a behemoth. Before they can even argue over what it really is, things escalate. Multiple wyverns appear in the sky, heading straight into the same area. It quickly becomes clear they've stumbled into a massive conflict. Fortunately, they realize that since the behemoth is also caught in this chaos, it won't go down easily against the wyverns. Their guess proves correct. The behemoth retaliates using powerful magic and comes out victorious. Rio can hardly contain his excitement at the strange things they've encountered so far. That evening, they sit by a campfire and talk. Rio jokes with Abel, saying he expected him to jump into the fight with the behemoth and give him a front row seat to a rematch. Though mischievous, it's clear he's only joking. Their conversation shifts to the behemoth's magic cancelling ability. Abel mentions he's only seen such things used in dungeon traps before. Hearing the word dungeon gets Rio curious. Abel catches on and asks if he's interested in such places. When Rio says yes, Abel tells him they're in luck. The only dungeon in the entire kingdom is located in Luna, the very city they're heading to. Rio teases Abel for not telling him earlier. Abel defends himself, saying he had no idea Rio was into dungeons. Rio, now suspicious, playfully presses Abel for more hidden knowledge. Abel asks if Rio has ever seen dwarfs or elves, adding that Luna is home to a number of strong dwarfs. Rio replies that he already knew, leaving Abel surprised and wondering how. Abel also mentions there's just one elf in Luna, and again Rio claims to know this already. As they trek through the mountain trail, Rio informs Abel that there's a human village just past the next hill. Abel, puzzled by Rio's knowledge, asks how he knows. Rio recalls that the dragon once mentioned it during a conversation, but realizing Abel wouldn't believe that explanation, he brushes it off and tells him to forget it. As they continue, a high-tier monster suddenly threatens them. Abel senses its immense presence and readies himself until he catches sight of the towering beast. Fear grips him, and even breathing becomes difficult. Fortunately, Rio acts fast. He distracts the creature by tossing some meat its way. The giant bird devours it and moves on without attacking. Abel is relieved and thankful for Rio's quick thinking. They press on, both disturbed by the strange events in that region. The creatures roaming this part of the world aren't ones normal people should be dealing with. Something feels very off about the mountain. Remembering the wyverns they saw earlier, they suspect the northern range might be their origin. Peering over a ridge, they spot a gruesome sight, a group of wyverns tearing into the remains of another large monster. They come to a mutual understanding. While Abel prefers avoiding confrontation, Rio is more inclined toward action. He argues that if they must engage in battle, now is the best opportunity, especially since the wyverns are grounded. They head into combat and manage to defeat their enemies. However, their relief is short-lived as a swarm of flying wyverns approaches. Reacting quickly, Rio unleashes his magic and takes them down mid-air, while Abel focuses on collecting the monster's magical cores. Abel, already riding the high of the fight, becomes even more exhilarated when more monsters appear. By the time the battle ends, both of them are exhausted yet energized, exchanging smiles that show how well they work together. Thanks for watching. If you like this anime recap, then please like, share and subscribe for the next part.